In the blistering heat of the Mojave Desert, a chameleon lives a sheltered and monotonous life in his glass terrarium. His existence is a peculiar mix of imagination and isolation, filled with the dreams of being someone important, a hero, or a star. His days are spent enacting grand fantasies, playing different roles within the safe confines of his terrarium, unaware that his world is about to be turned upside down. One fateful day, as his owners drive along a deserted road, the car hits a bump, sending the terrarium tumbling out of the vehicle. The glass shatters upon impact, and the once coddled chameleon is suddenly thrust into the harsh reality of the desert. As the dust settles, Johnny finds himself alone and vulnerable in an unfamiliar and hostile environment, the unrelenting sun beating down on him. Confused and terrified, the chameleon begins his perilous journey through the vast, unforgiving landscape. The desert, with its endless expanse of scorching sand and rugged terrain, is a stark contrast to the comfortable life he once knew. Thirst and hunger gnaw at him as he stumbles forward, unsure of where to go or how to survive. Amidst his wandering, he encounters a peculiar armadillo named Roadkill. Roadkill is an enigmatic and determined figure, half crushed by a passing car, yet still alive and driven by a quest for the spirit of the West. A mythical figure who represents the ideals of the old frontier: courage, honor, and independence. Roadkill, in his desperate state, offers him guidance, telling him to seek out a town called Dirt, where water, a precious and scarce resource in the desert, might be found. Buoyed by this glimmer of hope, he sets off in search of Dirt, but the journey is fraught with danger. As he makes his way across the desert, he attracts the attention of a red-tailed hawk, a fearsome predator whose shadow looms large over the arid landscape. The hawk swoops down, its sharp talons ready to snatch the unsuspecting chameleon. Now forced to rely on his wits and instincts, he narrowly escapes the hawk's deadly grip by seeking refuge in the sparse cover of the desert. As night falls, the desert transforms into an eerie, otherworldly place, and his exhaustion gives way to a surreal nightmare. His mind, overwhelmed by the day's events, conjures up a strange, dreamlike sequence filled with bizarre imagery and haunting visions. The line between reality and illusion blurs as he grapples with his fears and uncertainties, the vast emptiness of the desert reflecting his own feelings of insignificance and isolation. When dawn finally breaks, his journey brings him to an unexpected encounter with Beans, a desert iguana with a strong will and an even stronger sense of justice. Beans, the daughter of a local rancher, is a sharp, no-nonsense character who has learned to navigate the harsh realities of life in the desert. Despite his disheveled appearance and apparent lack of direction, Beans sees something in him. Perhaps a spark of potential, or maybe just a kindred spirit in a world that often feels indifferent to their struggles. Taking pity on the chameleon, Beans agrees to lead him to Dirt, a small dusty town that seems to have been forgotten by time. Dirt is an Old West outpost, populated by a colorful array of desert animals who have banded together in a desperate attempt to carve out a living in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. The town's buildings are weathered and worn, their facades crumbling under the relentless assault of the elements, and the townsfolk themselves are a hardy, resilient bunch, each with their own stories of survival and loss. As Johnny arrives in Dirt, he quickly realizes that he needs to adapt if he is to survive. Drawing on his experiences in his terrarium, where he played the roles of countless characters, he concocts a new identity for himself. He becomes Rango, a tough, fearless drifter with a mysterious past. With a swagger that is equal parts bravado and bluff, Rango presents himself to the townsfolk as a seasoned gunslinger, a man who has faced danger and come out the other side unscathed. The people of Dirt, desperate for a hero to save them from their troubles, are eager to believe Rango's tales of daring exploits and narrow escapes. They welcome him into their midst, unaware that his stories are nothing more than fabrications, the product of a fertile imagination and a desperate need to belong. Rango quickly ingratiates himself with the townsfolk, but his newfound reputation soon attracts the attention of Bad Bill, a Gila monster with a fearsome reputation as an outlaw and a bully. Bad Bill, who is used to getting his way through intimidation and brute force, confronts Rango, eager to put the newcomer in his place. The tension between the two mounts, and it seems that a shootout is inevitable. But just as the situation reaches a boiling point, the red-tailed hawk from earlier swoops down again, its menacing presence sending Bad Bill scurrying in fear. In a twist of fate, Rango once again finds himself being pursued by the hawk, and a frantic chase ensues through the streets of dirt. The chase reaches its climax when Rango, in a desperate attempt to escape, accidentally topples an old abandoned water tower. The massive structure comes crashing down, crushing the hawk beneath it and leaving Rango standing victorious, albeit more by luck than skill. The townspeople who witness this dramatic turn of events are in awe of Rango's apparent bravery and prowess. In their eyes, he has proven himself worthy of the title of sheriff, and they waste no time in appointing him to the position, hoping that he might bring some semblance of order to their troubled town. But all is not as it seems in Dirt. The town's water supply, once stored safely in the local bank inside a water cooler bottle, has mysteriously dwindled to almost nothing. The dwindling water supply is the lifeblood of Dirt, and without it, the town is doomed. Beans, ever vigilant and skeptical of easy answers, demands that Rango investigate the matter. She senses that something is amiss, that there's more to the story than meets the eye. That night, Rango, still trying to live up to his newfound role as sheriff, comes across a group of strangers in the town. Mistaking them for prospectors, he inadvertently helps them in what he believes to be a harmless endeavor. But the next morning, the town wakes to find their precious water bottles stolen, and the strangers are revealed to be a trio of bank robbers, led by a mole named Balthazar. Panic spreads through the town like wildfire, and the people who had placed their trust in Rango begin to question his abilities. Feeling the weight of his responsibilities, Rango quickly organizes a posse to track down the thieves and recover the stolen water. The posse, a motley crew of the town's best fighters, sets off into the desert, their mission fraught with danger and uncertainty. As they search for the robbers, they stumble upon the lifeless body of Merrimack, the bank manager, who has met a tragic and ironic end, drowned in the very desert where water is so desperately scarce. The posse eventually tracks the robbers to their hideout, leading to a wild and chaotic chase through a treacherous canyon. The two groups clash, fighting desperately for control of the stolen water bottle. The battle is intense, filled with daring maneuvers and near misses. But when the dust finally settles, the bottle is revealed to be empty, a hollow victory that only deepens the town's despair. Despite the robbers' claims that they found the bottle already empty, the posse has little choice but to bring them back to Dirt to face trial. The townspeople, who had once looked to Rango as their savior, now view him with suspicion and doubt. The realization that their hopes may have been misplaced weighs heavily on the town, and Rango, too, begins to question his own worth. In a tense confrontation, Rango decides to confront the mayor, a shrewd and calculating tortoise who has been quietly orchestrating events from behind the scenes. The mayor, who presents himself as a benevolent leader, has been buying up land around Dirt, seemingly with the intention of expanding the town's borders. But as Rango digs deeper, he uncovers a more sinister plan. The mayor is not interested in the well-being of Dirt's inhabitants. He's building a modern city on the land he has acquired, a gleaming metropolis that will cater to the wealthy and powerful, leaving the town and its people to wither and die. The mayor, sensing that Rango is becoming a threat to his plans, decides to take action. He calls upon Rattlesnake Jake, a legendary gunslinger feared throughout the desert for his ruthless nature and deadly skills. Jake, who has a long history with the mayor, arrives in town, his very presence sending chills down the spines of the townsfolk. With a few well-chosen words and a menacing display of power, Jake strips Rango of his authority, exposing him as a fraud, and forcing him to admit that his entire persona is built on lies. Humiliated and broken, Rango is run out of town, his confidence shattered, and his sense of identity in tatters. He wanders the desert, lost and alone, plagued by doubts and questions. Who is he, really? What is his place in the world? As he stumbles through the desolate landscape, he encounters the Spirit of the West, a mysterious and legendary figure who appears as a rugged, weathered cowboy, riding a battered golf cart through the desert. The Spirit of the West is a living embodiment of the ideals that Rango had always admired: the courage, the independence, and the unyielding strength of character that defined the heroes of the Old West. To Rango's astonishment, the Spirit bears an uncanny resemblance to Clint Eastwood, the epitome of the silent, strong hero that Rango had always imagined himself to be. The Spirit, speaking in riddles and parables, imparts a simple yet profound lesson. No man can walk out on his own story. This enigmatic phrase strikes a chord deep within Rango, reigniting the flicker of determination within him. The spirit's words remind him that he cannot simply abandon his journey, no matter how difficult or terrifying it may seem. His story, with all its ups and downs, is his own, and it's up to him to see it through to the end. Empowered by this newfound wisdom, Rango's resolve hardens. He decides that he must return to Dirt, not as the imposter he once was, but as his true self. He may not be the hero he pretended to be, but he realizes that courage doesn't come from pretending to be something you're not. It comes from standing up for what's right, even when you're scared, and even when the odds are stacked against you. Determined to save the town from the clutches of the mayor and Rattlesnake Jake, Rango seeks out Roadkill, the armadillo who had first set him on his path. Together with Roadkill and a group of mystical yuccas, desert plants that seem to move with a will of their own, Rango discovers the truth about Dirt's water supply. The mayor has been controlling the town's water through an emergency shutoff valve connected to a pipeline leading all the way to Las Vegas. By manipulating the flow of water, the mayor has been keeping the townsfolk desperate and under his control, all while amassing power and wealth for himself. With this knowledge in hand, Rango hatches a daring plan to take back the town. He knows that he cannot do it alone, so he enlists the help of the very robbers he had captured earlier, forming an unlikely alliance with Balthazar and his gang. These outlaws, who had once been enemies, now join forces with Rango, recognizing that they have a common enemy in the mayor. Rango returns to Dirt with a bold challenge. He calls out Rattlesnake Jake for a duel, a showdown that will determine the fate of the town. The townsfolk, watching from the shadows, are filled with a mix of fear and hope. They've seen Rango fail before, but something about his demeanor this time is different. There's a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that was missing before. As the duel begins, it quickly becomes apparent that Rango has no intention of fighting Jake directly. Instead, the duel is a ruse, a distraction to buy time for Balthazar and the Yuccas to carry out the real plan. While Jake is focused on Rango, the robbers sneak around to the pipeline's valve and turn it, releasing a torrent of water that floods the town. The water, so long hoarded by the mayor, now rushes through the streets of Dirt, bringing life back to the parched land and washing away the mayor's carefully laid plans. But the mayor is not so easily defeated. Realizing that his scheme is unraveling, he takes Beans hostage and forces Rango to surrender. He locks Rango and Beans inside the glass bank vault, where they're left to drown as the water continues to rise. The mayor, believing that he has won, attempts to shoot Rattlesnake Jake, whom he sees as a relic of the past that needs to be eradicated to make way for his new vision of the future. However, the mayor's plan backfires spectacularly. Unbeknownst to him, Rango had taken the single bullet from the gun earlier, leaving the mayor defenseless. Using the bullet, Rango shatters the glass of the vault, freeing himself and Beans just as the water floods the room. The sudden rush of water not only saves them, but also washes the mayor and his henchmen out into the street, where they are overwhelmed by the force of the flood. In the aftermath, Rattlesnake Jake, who had been watching the events unfold, is surprisingly impressed by Rango's courage and ingenuity. Recognizing that Rango had saved his life by disarming the mayor, Jake tips his hat in respect, acknowledging Rango as a worthy adversary. He then drags the mayor into the desert, leaving the fate of the treacherous tortoise to be decided by the unforgiving sands. The town of Dirt, now flooded with life-giving water, erupts in celebration. The once dry and desolate streets are transformed into a thriving community, with the townsfolk rejoicing in their newfound hope. They no longer see Rango as a fraud or a pretender. Instead, they recognize him as the hero they always needed, not because of his exaggerated tales or his supposed toughness, but because he stood up for them when it mattered most. As the sun sets over the revitalized town, Rango stands at the edge of Dirt, looking out over the horizon. He's no longer the aimless chameleon who stumbled into the desert, nor the bumbling sheriff who tried to bluff his way through danger. He is simply Rango, a creature who found his place in the world not by pretending to be someone else, but by discovering the courage to be himself. And so, with a newfound sense of purpose, Rango prepares for whatever new adventures might come his way, knowing that he is no longer alone. He has found a home, a community, and most importantly, he has found himself.